So you are all getting ready to come to LaWayra, come to Colombia, take this mysterious, pretty icky tasting brew and have some experience with ayahuasca. You have made, I can tell you, before even meeting you, knowing anything about you, before you've gotten here, you have made a good choice. This medicine truly is, beautiful, mystical, powerful, everything you've heard about it. You guys obviously don't know me, you don't know my background, so I want to be careful not come across as some ayahuasca zealot, but truly as someone that is, really had to be convinced through my own personal experiences. This medicine is pretty much the closest thing I come across to like real magic in the world. That said, going through the processes of like real magic can be really challenging. And so what this course is mainly designed for, this section of the course, this navigating experience, is trying to help you be prepared and understand what some of those central challenges are so you can show up already a few steps ahead and not just get trapped in all these things. This medicine is the closest thing that I have come to experiencing real magic in the world. The power, the diversity, the awe of the experience, the way it's just all tied together in some kind of storyline is incredible. And while almost without fail, whenever anyone comes through here, and we have like at least 70 people a month usually, almost always when people get onto the bus to leave after the retreat, they're happy. They've experienced some of the beauty, the love, the awe, the healing, the growth from ayahuasca that people come here for. Almost also without fail, in getting to that point, they have to go through these troughs of frustration and challenge and contraction before expansion and all of these learning steps. So I want to pause for a little bit and just talk about what some of those troughs and challenges and difficulties can be. I think one of the main things that is challenging about working with ayahuasca is this sort of dual reality between not knowing what to expect and also coming in with expectations. So on the one hand, for so many of us, ayahuasca is something new. For me, I've drank over 120 ceremonies and still I am surprised and, taken aback by how ayahuasca is working. It's always new. So on the one hand, we don't know what to expect, right? You're coming to a place where a shaman can say, "Este es un proceso felino," and be totally right in a way that I never would have believed before I worked here. It just seemed absurd to me, but hey, it was a feline process. Stepping into that unknown can be super scary. So that's hard on the one hand. Over here, though, on the other hand, I have found through my work here that we as humans are expectation and desire creating machines. It's just how our brain works. If you believe in evolution, then you would believe that, as animals evolving to survive in the wild, our minds would have had to develop a very robust connection to this expectation process so that if I see a dark shadow and expect that there might be a predator hiding in that shadow, I'll avoid it and I'll be naturally selected for survival. So it's just part of our brain. We get a lot of people coming through here who are like, I have no expectations for ayahuasca. And then they list off 3 expectations they have, or they find themselves 3 days later getting really frustrated because something didn't happen. So this is a really challenging starting point. On the one hand, we're new to ayahuasca. Unless we have grown up with ayahuasca indigenously in our culture since children, we are always going to be new to ayahuasca, no matter how many ceremonies we have under our belt. So on the one hand, we don't know what to expect. On the other hand, that's just how our brain works. We hear stories from people. We watch videos. We read articles. Some of us, as I said, will probably have drank some ceremonies before we had these expectations. And so we begin to think on some oftentimes subconscious level that we know what we're in for. We have some idea of what's this going to be. And so that conflict is really challenging. Ayahuasca, though, as this mysterious medicine, is constantly evading prediction. You have no idea what you're in for. Honestly, I've found over time, pretty much the only way to know what you're in for is if you expect something, that's more or less the one thing you can be pretty certain is not going to happen, at least in the way you expect it to. That's really hard to be working with. So we start with that. That's that starting conflict. Beyond that is just the fact that working with mysteries such as ayahuasca is inherently, I think, frustrating, scary, and confusing. That potential to transform us is matched by that. So this is a big, mumbo jumbo mix of things that can trip people up. And just coming here, taking ayahuasca, and having a healing time. Ayahuasca's power to heal and transform is pretty much matched by its power to confuse. In this place where Klaus came and cried into my shoulder for hours, someone he had met, a few days ago, and then turned into some cat spirit. The laws that we have figured out for how the world works just don't always seem to fit here. So even if we've had tons of experience with ayahuasca, we can still just inherently, ayahuasca can be challenging. We can puke for hours. We can confront these difficult feelings. And so these are challenging experiences that can come up. Number one, we all know what to expect. Number two, and yet we have all of these expectations just from how the human mind works. And number three, ayahuasca in itself, this mysterious, trippy, challenging thing, will be throwing us difficulties regardless of how prepared we are. In many ways, being in an ayahuasca retreat can feel like you're just being thrown into a rushing river without knowing how to swim. Always, you are going to be the person that needs to learn how to swim. But I have seen hundreds of people go through this process of learning. And so with that experience, I want to give you 5 tips that will help you relax into this process, start treading water, start doing some tricks, doing some backflips in the water, and enjoy your time here rather than just thrashing around and getting exhausted by the inherent challenges that come up in working with ayahuasca. So every single one of us is going to show up wanting something. We all have some reason for taking time out of our lives, paying money for a flight to Colombia, paying money for an ayahuasca retreat, and coming here to take this medicine, which, by the way, can make you puke and, feel super sick. We all generally have come here in search of something. It's not very common that, like a moth to a flame, someone just saw that the lights were on and wander into LaWayra. If you don't have some, why for coming here, you should honestly figure it out, right? As I'm saying, most people find this work to be challenging in some way. And so having that why, which you could also call an intention, is the anchor in the storm. It's the thing that will guide you through this process. But essentially, what I'm driving at is we do want something from ayahuasca. Also, we usually have done some research, have heard about it from someone or somewhere on the internet or some book, and have an idea of what we think we're in for, right? What is ayahuasca like? So we think we're going to puke. Usually you do. But that, for example, that's an expectation of what ayahuasca will be like. We think we're going to see crazy hallucinations. We think, if any of you have smoked DMT before, we're going to blast through and all of a sudden be in some cosmic realm totally separated from kind of the world around us. So on the one hand, there are the desires, the things we want from ayahuasca, which is not a bad thing. And then we also have these expectations. What is ayahuasca going to be like? Both these things, almost every single person is carrying. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to pause this video and take some time to make a written list. Make a T-chart. So here, 2 columns, desires, expectations. What are the things that I want from ayahuasca? What are the things I'm hoping for? And what do I think ayahuasca is like? Because these will be functioning. And as I said earlier, it is totally normal to have expectations and desires. We assume it is, unless you have been, meditating in a monastery for about 5 decades, all of us to some important degree are moved by the expectations and desires that we're populating. So I want you to pause and think about what yours are. Allow yourself to acknowledge these things that are probably functioning on some level, and then come back to the video. Okay, I'm going to guess that you just paused it and then press play again. Good job if you did the activity. That's great. The reason I want to have this list is because, as I said, totally natural to have expectations. But the danger is, without even knowing it, we can become so attached to these expectations about what we think is going to happen that we really struggle to be flexible and responsive to reality as it unfolds. The unexpected can be very shocking. And not getting what we want can be really painful because we want that thing. We've taken time out of our life. We've paid money. This is what I want. This is what I paid for. And so if we can step back and just see these things as mental projections, then we're helping ourselves start off. Instead of what we call getting with what is, we become trapped by frustration, anger, disappointment. that things are not the way we want, therefore missing what simply is. And as we all know, reality rarely just gives us exactly what we want. We oftentimes have to flow with it and have some sort of give and take between it. This trap of frustration, anger, disappointment is really easy to fall into. In my opinion, there are kind of three main causes for this stumble into the trap. Number one, as I already mentioned, ayahuasca works inherently in complex, shifting, confusing ways, constantly forcing us to deal with the unexpected or kind of the unpredictable. As I said earlier, almost to the extent that if you expect something, that's the one thing that you can be pretty sure is not going to happen in the way you're expecting it to. So that's number one. Ayahuasca in itself is challenging. Number two, as outsiders to these traditions, we lack the sort of soft conceptual literacy that those who grew up with ayahuasca as part of the fabric of their life have. A good example of this sort of phenomenon is I had a friend when I was in college who had grown up in a very dry family where no one drank alcohol and it was forbidden for her to interact with alcohol. And so when she got to college and she finally had all of this alcohol around her, she ended up drinking a lot and she went to the hospital a number of times. The reason for that, in my opinion, or part of it, is that she had not grown up seeing alcohol being used by people around her. And so she didn't understand its impact on people, the pacing you needed, the quantity that would kind of keep you within a safe range. She didn't have that soft understanding that, shamans who have grown up in communities that use ayahuasca have, just by token of having been around it their whole life. So my friend's exposure to alcohol is similar to a lot of our exposure to ayahuasca. Instead of understanding it through daily lived experience in the way that Fernando, our shaman, did as a child, our first exposure to ayahuasca tends to come from popular media that grossly misrepresents the actual reality or whole holistic picture of ayahuasca. So by no fault of our own, we show up primed and ready to stumble into this trap. Ayahuasca is challenging, and a lot of us don't have an actual understanding of how ayahuasca works. We get these incomplete pictures. So acknowledging that we might have some challenges coming ahead of us and working with ayahuasca is a great place to start. With that starting point, I would like to humbly offer you 5 tips that I've found to be pretty helpful for people in coming to an ayahuasca retreat and working with ayahuasca rather than against it.